The incidence of prostate cancer in rural Australia is 45% higher than in metropolitan regions and is the biggest killer of men in the world. Here to tell me why and what's being done about it is Ruth Logan. Ruth is the Education Program Facilitator for It's a Bloke Thing. Thanks, Ruth, for joining me today. Those statistics are really astonishing and alarming. So why is there such a big gap between men in the bush and city men?
I guess there's a lot of reasons for that. Men in the bush are probably thinking that they're too busy to worry about their health. That's one of the things. The medical services available to them are difficult to access sometimes and not available. And for a bloke in the bush, to take the time out from their busy lifestyles, and particularly with the tough times that they've been having with drought or flood or fire or just generally, having to be on their farm, they find it hard when they've got to go away to the city to have treatment.
I guess too, our men folk in the city are able to just pop around the corner to the doctor in their lunch hour or something, where it's more difficult for us, for men in the bush, because they might have to drive 1 or 2 hours.
Look, I think Kelly, one of the big things that's really helped women with breast cancer is the introduction of the breast screen bus that goes around and services women in the rural communities very adequately, really. And one of the dreams that I have is that I could get a bloke's bus that's going to be comparable to the boob bus. And then we could have, when the men come in and bring the women in maybe for their breast screens, that we could have the men being screened or have their blood tests for prostate cancer checks as well.
So, is that a reality, do you think?
Look, I don't know. Nothing's impossible in my world. And the It's a Bloke Thing Foundation is an incredibly philanthropic organisation. They've raised over $2 million again just 2 weeks ago.
I was going to ask you about that because it's raised through a lunch, isn't it?
Yes.
And the first lunch, they raised $60,000 or something 9 years ago. And now, in that short amount of time, over $2 million, that is absolutely incredible.
It's the biggest daytime fundraising event in Australia. And I think it's the generosity of the community in Toowoomba and in the wider Toowoomba region too. Because
Toowoomba's where it started, but it's you're branching out into all other regions, aren't you?
Well, It's a Bloke Thing Foundation was started by two blokes having a conversation, and they had both been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and they were mates, and they went, well, why aren't we talking about this? So their hope with the It's a Bloke Thing Foundation was to encourage men to start having that conversation, not only with their doctors but with their mates. And so 9 years later, they now have a lunch in Darwin in March. They've had 2 lunches up there now under the It's a Bloke Thing Foundation banner. We had a lunch at the Gold Coast in May this year, which was the inaugural Gold Coast luncheon, and we had the 9th year of lunch in Toowoomba. But those men and their wives, there's a committee of businessmen and women in Toowoomba that devote a lot of time and energy to raising this money. It doesn't obviously happen without a lot of effort, and they need to be commended for the amount of work they do to generate that sort of interest and that passion and that contribution to such an amazing cause.
So they obviously caught their prostate cancer in the early stages?
Yes, they both did, and they're both fully fine now. They're in complete, good health. And, people say to me, why is a woman like you travelling the state in a ute and talking about prostate cancer? And I guess that is a mystery to some people. So the reason is I've been a dietitian. That's my previous life, and I was in private practice, and I've always worked a lot with men. I've always enjoyed working with men and helping them to create change in their dietary patterns to achieve better outcomes with their health. And I took a gap year. My kids had all had gap years, and I decided last year I was going to have a gap year. And I came back to Clermont and spent some time with my mum, and then I decided that I needed to do something else, and this opportunity was offered to me. And I have a great passion for it because 5 men in my life have had prostate cancer. So my father had prostate cancer, my father-in-law had prostate cancer, my an older brother had prostate cancer some time ago at only age 48. My husband had prostate cancer at 51, and my other brother has had some, he's under surveillance, I guess is what you'd say, active surveillance. So that's 5 men, and all 5 of those men have survived prostate cancer because they were detected and diagnosed early.
Yep. So that's the key, isn't it? So your role is educating, particularly men, but I guess wives have to be educated too, because they're the ones that have to get their husbands to the doctor.
That's very true, in not just in rural areas, but I think more so in rural areas, because you've got to convince the men that it's worth making that time. And your health is your wealth, and it doesn't matter how many thousands of acres or how many thousands of heads of cattle that you have. If you haven't got your health, you don't have anything really. And it's about getting that connection for men and making them realise that a few minutes spent going to the doctor, having that conversation and deciding, firstly, they need to have this conversation with their doctor to decide if they really want to be tested or not. That's the first thing. And it's not compulsory. We don't have a screening process for prostate cancer, simply because there's no test that's 100% definitive for prostate cancer. So it's a blood test now that they have. But some men don't want to know, and it's that simple. But I certainly encourage them to go and have that conversation with their doctor and make an informed decision about the risks and the benefits of being tested. And then they can make that decision, and then it is just as simple as a blood test now, and you have what we call a PSA test, which is the prostate specific antigen, and it is specific for prostate, but it's not specific for prostate cancer. So if someone has a blood test and it's a little bit high, that level, it doesn't necessarily mean they've got cancer. It could mean that they've got an infection of their prostate, or it could mean that they've, with the ageing process, that they're getting what we call benign hyperplasia, and that just means that the prostate's getting bigger. And
so what age do you recommend people, encourage people men to go and have that test?
Well, the first thing depends on your family history. So it's really important that these men know their family history. So they need to have that conversation firstly with their fathers and uncles and people that are close relatives to them, to know if anyone has had prostate cancer. So if you know that you've had a family member, particularly if they had it when they were young, we would encourage that you should go to your doctor by the age of 40 and have that conversation. If you're a bloke that has no knowledge of your family history, then I would be saying somewhere between 40 and 45 is probably a good idea. But if you know that you have no history of prostate cancer, then it's recommended by the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, whose guidelines I adhere to, that you should have that conversation by the time you're 50. And the normal levels for PSA are a little bit confusing, I think, at the moment. There's a lot of confusion in GP land about whether it's a good idea to test or not to test. I've had some men who've had their doctors refuse to test them because they didn't think that it was a good idea to get them anxious about something else in their life,
that's interesting.
And unfortunately, I've had a couple of men that's happened to that have been then diagnosed with late stage prostate cancer.
Because I imagine early detection, detection of breast cancer, anything.
Early detection is
critical.
much better way. And 95% of men who are detected in the early stages, it's contained within the prostate, and it's there's so many different treatment options available if it's early stage too, but there's a 95% or greater chance that you will have the treatment, and that will be the end of the story for you, that you'll have no further prostate problems. So that's...
Ruth, just getting back to the lunch, I had a look at some of the highlights on the website. Oh my gosh.
It's a bit of a who's who in the zoo, isn't it?
I cannot believe Keith Urban was there. James Morrison, Ray Martin, Kerry Ann Kenley, the list just goes on. It's incredible support out there.
Look, and Keith Urban was extraordinarily generous. His father had prostate cancer, so there's so many men in this world that are affected by this disease. It's the most common cancer in men, and you find somebody who's had somebody close to them affected by it, they're more than happy to do things to help.
Yeah.
And that was Keith Urban's story. So
Yeah.
that was a real coup, getting Keith Urban last year. We had Ronan Keating flew in from London this year. Yes, there's been a bit of a celebrity fest in Toowoomba. It causes a lot of excitement every year about who's going to be the person that's going to be the guest speaker.
Yeah.
One of my favourites was Li Shenxuan, the Chinese ballet dancer.
Yes.
He was he was the guest speaker at the very first prostate cancer lunch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you also have a lot of corporate support as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. The corporate community of Toowoomba and the Gold Coast, and the people on the committee are very well connected, and they have a lot of influence, and you know, it's extremely generous, the support that we get. Yeah, it's incredible.
And Ruth, with some of the funding obviously is going towards you in your education role and travelling, but you cover research as well and care.
Yes, so all the money that's raised by the It's a Bloke Thing Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organisation, is donated to the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, and they then distribute that money through three things. So we have care, education and research. There are three pillars. So with the care, that includes the employment of 3 prostate care nurses. So there's one in Toowoomba that's a full-time position, one in Darwin that's been appointed now, and there's very soon to be one starting on the Gold Coast.
That's wonderful.
Now the Prostate Cancer Foundation have a lot more prostate care nurses, but It's a Bloke Thing funds those 3 specific sites. They support me in my role as an educator, and it's a very interesting thing to see. I've just been at an international conference in Melbourne, and I think there was me, and I don't think there was anyone else that was there that was doing the education at that preventative end of the spectrum. Everybody was there were professors of medicine, and they were all worried about the treatment of metastatic disease, and I sort of feel like a bit like a lone wolf, but there are other people doing it. There's another organisation that's doing it in Queensland too, but it's a big state. And I've done 20,000 kilometres since May.
Oh wow.
So we're trying, and my ambition is to get to the rural people, because they're the ones that miss out. I grew up at Clermont. I know what it's like to grow up in the country areas.
So if people want to know more, just jump onto the
Look, there's 3 places that I'd recommend more information. So the first one would be the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia website, and they have community online forums. So if anyone's undergoing treatment or is in the process of being diagnosed and wanting to decide what to do about the diagnosis, then the PCFA is the place to go. You can also get information from the Cancer Council of Australia, and the It's a Bloke Thing Foundation. We have a website and Facebook page and things too. But I travel around, and I have done show circuits. I go to corporate organisations. I do road shows, talks, presentations, go to local councils. I really want to go to anywhere there's a group of blokes. And I'm quite happy to speak to a group of women too, because as you alluded to, women are often the ones who encourage the appointments to get made. They hold the power. And you know, I think it's just good coming from a woman, because I know how important these men are in our lives, and we want to preserve them, and we want them to be around for us and our children. And sometimes you can't help bad luck, but if there's something you can do that helps to minimise your risk of not being around, then why not do it? You know, it just seems like it's a no-brainer to me. Go to your doctor, make a date, check your prostate, have that conversation, and then the other thing is my mantra is know your number. I really want men to know their PSA number so that they have control of that. They've got improved literacy about their health, and they know if it's changing. So they must know what's a normal number for them, and when it's changing, and how fast it's changing is an indicator of whether or not they need to take some further action.
Oh, thanks Ruth, you're doing a wonderful job. Thanks so much for watching our video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please try to remember to just click on the subscribe button so we can keep you updated with everything that's happening. Thank you.